Alright, before I begin with today's subject, administrative matters. First, I went to the library, spoke with the interim library director, and sometime next week you will have all of the text will be uploaded to the library server, so you won't have to download from the website I gave you. You still will use that website, however, for any little quizzes that I give to see how well you understand what we're doing. But you will also have the option of obtaining all of the text from the library. I've given them about 1,000 or so different digital books, so they're going to upload. I'm going to sit down with them and help them sort through them and upload, and they'll be on the library server. Also, you still have the option, if you have a flash drive or if you are working with someone who has a flash drive, stop by my office and I will place your materials on your flash drive. That's the first thing. Second thing, whenever I post something on that website, please read carefully. It was brought to my attention today that my class had a class presentation. And so I was asking, what are you talking about? You said, well, some students, you have a presentation students doing. So, please read carefully what we're going to be doing for that day so that you aren't confused and worrying yourself needlessly. Are there any questions about anything before I move on? No questions. All right, now, beginning Monday, you are expected to daily read the following newspapers because we will be utilizing them beginning Monday in class. You don't have to buy them all individually, but you will be doing news analysis. Remember, I told you on day one, macroeconomics is a subject that we're going to localize in the Tanzanian setting. And in order to do that, you have to know what is going on daily in Tanzania as far as the economy is concerned. So, and as I said before, you should be working in groups. You should have formed steady groups. It is imperative that you form steady groups in here because once you start getting your first projects to work on, you're going to need to be in groups. And by working in a group, it alleviates or reduces, rather, the amount of work that each individual has to do. But in here, you will be required to read the following newspapers: Kiongozi, Uhuru, the newspaper This Day, The Mirror. On Sunday, you have the Business Times. You need to be reading The African, The East African, The Citizen, The Guardian, The Daily News, and Umwananchi. Those are all newspapers that you need to be reading on a daily basis to stay abreast of what we're going to be doing, what we are doing in this class. As I started on the last class period, or 2 class periods ago, you will notice I began class with a particular article from the paper. You're required in here. Each week, starting next week, you're going to do newspaper analysis of a story that has specific macroeconomic concerns. I am going to post for you the guidelines on how to analyze the piece. And you will submit that piece electronically. You will email it to me at my email address that I provide for you on the syllabus. You will be able to receive it, or you will be able to upload it onto the Edmodo website for our class. I required the electronic version as opposed to a hard copy because it allows me to check the sources that you have used or whatever you have done much easier than with your written copies. Alright, so I hope we made note of the newspapers because you will be utilizing them on a day-to-day basis in this class. Are there any questions? No questions. Alright, let's move on. In today's issue of the African, interesting story. Land grabbers invade the Limby region. What's the subject of the story? It has to do with small farmers in Limby who have been pushed out their land by government officials. The story doesn't list who the government officials are. Why is this a macroeconomic issue? Because another one of your newspapers over here also for today specified that you have countries like Qatar, Middle Eastern country, a country located on the Arabian Peninsula, however, is interested in buying several hundred hectares of land, not for agriculture, but not to grow food for the Tanzanian setting and the East African setting, but to grow food and export it back to Qatar. So this becomes a macroeconomic issue because when those contracts are signed, if the contract is done in such a, if it's done the way they are normally done, then it will not benefit Tanzania. It won't benefit East Africa. What it will do is provide very large amount of tax incentives, tax cuts for these businesses. They're not going to be paying any taxes. They're going to be exporting their produce, and whatever jobs that are created are all of the technical jobs will be staffed by non-Tanzanians, and the only job the Tanzanians will be provided in such an economic deal will strictly be unskilled work, unskilled agricultural work. That is a macroeconomic problem. That comes back to our two primary problems that we wrote a couple of weeks ago. Why is the budget of this country still depending on Western aid? Why isn't the country developed as everyone needs? Those two questions are interrelated. So, having said all of that, how are we going to come up with new solutions for problems such as that? That is the purpose of your first reading that you had for this week. You'll remember that last week, well, the other day rather, not last week, but Monday, we started off with the guidelines for reasoning, and I recommend that everyone make sure they have a copy of it for your class. Now, for today's and every other reading that we do in here, I stated that one of the things you had to do was to read the piece, critically analyze the piece, and you should come to class and you should have some questions. When you read anything, you should be forming questions. Remember, on the first class period, when I gave to you the manner in which we're going to be dealing with things or analyzing, how we're going to be looking at the materials that we deal with, I told you the current education system that you've been a part of was very good here with providing a knowledge. Notice I didn't say the knowledge, but I said it provided you with a knowledge. Because going back to what I repeated over and over again in this class, there is no such thing as a correct answer. It depends on your point of view and how well you defend your point of view. The current education system is very good at providing a knowledge. I'm putting that article there. I know in Swahili there are no articles, but in the English we're putting that article there because it's a knowledge. It's not the knowledge. A knowledge means that there are many different types of knowledge. The knowledge says this is the supreme thing. That is not the case. You have been given a knowledge, and this system has been very good at providing it. And you have been very well prepared in comprehending that knowledge. Very well prepared at understanding the particular knowledge that has been provided to you in the form of textbooks written in the United States, written in the United Kingdom. So you've been provided with a knowledge. But I said we're starting at this level, analysis. We are starting here at analysis. That is why I am here at TUICO. To begin with analysis and then to move up to the next level, it is application, and then to move beyond that into evaluation, and then to move to the next level, which is creation, where you are creating innovative solutions, innovative, new, something that has not been seen before. You can't do that with a knowledge. You can do that if you take a knowledge and adapt that knowledge to your own set and your own use. Now, a basic question that should have, and some people did ask, coming by and asked it, was, how do you do a critical analysis? What exactly are you supposed to do with the readings that are provided to you besides reading? Besides reading, what else are you supposed to do with it? That is the whole point of me providing you with this outline on critical analysis. So now, the first thing you need to make note of on a piece of paper is when you are reading something in here, and if you have this, just write it off on here. You should turn all 8 of these particular steps in this critical analysis guideline into questions. The first one deals with purpose. So your question should be, what is the purpose of the text? You'll notice here I have textual analysis. Anything that's given to you in written form is a text. You're going to engage in textual analysis. You're going to break down what that text is. So your first step, and please make a note of this, write it down. Because this is what you're going to be doing in here and then moving to the next level. The first step in textual analysis, if we're going to use it here, is all 8 of the things on the first handout, you turn them into questions. So number 1 becomes, what is the purpose of the text you're reading? Number 2 is, what is this text trying to do? Is it trying to get you to figure something out, to settle a question, or is it trying to solve a problem? The next question you will be answering from whatever you are reading in there, what assumptions are being made? What assumptions are being made? Number 4, what is the point of view of the text? What is the point of view? Number 5, what data, information, or evidence is being used in the text? Number 6, what concepts and ideas are in the text? Number 7, what inferences are being made? What interpretations are being made? What conclusions are being drawn in the text that you are reading? And number 8, what implications and consequences does the text suggest? You will not merely be taking a piece and just calling words and calling that reading. You will be actively reading because you will be actively thinking about everything that is being said in the text. And then you will turn the next sheet into questions. The first one here, on the next one, is clarity. So that becomes the question. Is this piece clear to me? Do you understand what it's saying? Does it meet the standard of clarity? Is this text accurate? This is active reading now. This is active analysis. Is this text precise? Is everything that was said in this text relevant? Does it meet the standard of depth, breadth, as well as is this text logical? So now, you will form all of those questions, and then as you read the text, all of the readings that we will do in here, as you read them, what you will be doing is answering those questions from them. Then you will have begun to critically analyze. And by the time we finish this course at the end of the semester, you will be very good at doing that. Remember, we are not focusing in this class on memorization, which is right here. A knowledge and comprehending that knowledge. That is not our focus here. We are starting immediately here with analysis, and specifically critical analysis. And how do you do that? That is what the first handout is showing you. And you will go through that process. Are there any questions so far? Any comments? So now, that is what you're going to do. So now let's go into the text itself. How many people did not have a problem with reading the text, downloading it, or somehow you had a chance to get to the material? I know some people in here did because you were talking to other professors and then they were telling me, because they were asking you, well, why didn't you try to do this or that? You see, remember I told you on day one, this course is about problem solving. Some of us have different problems with it as far as getting to the information that is required for the course. It is not for me to solve the problem that you have. That is for you to do. You have to solve that problem. That's the first basic problem. And you will solve it in different ways. Some of you solved it by finding somebody to work with. Some of you have solved it by getting with some professor you know and getting the material downloaded. Some of you are just kind of sitting like a knot on the log wondering as if the answer is just going to fall out of heaven. It's not. Some people solved it by coming by the office and getting the material from me. Obtaining the materials for the class is a problem that you're going to have to solve. I took away the main financial burden, which was having you to have to buy the text. I provided it free. But as far as how you're going to be able to get it, that's not for me to figure out. That's for you to figure out. If you come up with a solution, and somehow that solution involves me, then that's for you to come and sit down and tell me about your solution. But it's not for me to sit down and figure out how are you going to get the information. It's not how it works. And I made that very clear on day one. This is not a lecture class where I tell you what's in the piece. I expect, as I reiterated on that website, constant participation in this class. So now, how many people had the opportunity to read the material? So now, we had a chance to read the material. How many made some notes from the material? Back up. Those who didn't have the chance to read the material, what exactly did you do? Were any efforts made to get to the material? Which means some of us, yes, someone was saying something?
Some of us got the material, but the problem is I didn't give any more tools, and we went through that we didn't get to finish.
You weren't supposed to. You weren't supposed to finish all of this. The key thing for this period was to get to the material, to figure out how you're going to get it. That was the key thing for him. You couldn't do the critical analysis And some people figure that out because you didn't know how to do it. That was provided to you yet. See, problem solving is all around. And the best way to get you into the mode of problem solving is to provide you with situations that you are not familiar with to see how to solve a problem. That's the whole point. The purpose for today is for me to go through the first chapter and give you an idea of what I'm talking about when I say textual analysis. Anytime I give you something new in this class that I know you haven't done before, I am going to show you how to do it. And then you go out and do it. I'm not going to give you something and say, here, go and do it, knowing that you don't know how to do it. And I make a point of providing you with new experiences. So, now, this piece comes from the book, The Turning Point. The book was written in 1978. In this class, I mentioned that we're going to be looking at things differently. We're going to be focusing in on a particular way of thinking. We started with critical analysis. The other component is what this text is leading you into, a different way of viewing things. Right now, you have what we call a compartmentalized way of looking at things. It's compartmentalized. Another term you can use, segmented. Final term, separate. Alright, so the way the educational system you've been a part of is set up, the way all systems that come out of the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and whatnot is set up, everything is in compartments. So over here you have Kiswahili class. Over here you have science class. Over here you have some type of literature class. Everything is separate. In the social sciences, you get a history class over there, civics class over here, political science class over there, sociology over here. It's all separate. It's in compartments. Problem is, when you compartmentalize knowledge in that fashion, you start getting little segmented solutions. Sociologists look at it and say, here's how you solve the problem. Psychologist says, here's how you solve the problem. You get these, people specialize in certain areas. You specialize in particular areas. So you major in psychology, and that's you separate different knowledge aspects. The information that I provided for you beginning here is not using a segmented or separate or compartmentalized way of looking at things. Those of you who read the course syllabus will notice that the first thing I told you was that you will be doing multidisciplinary analysis. Multidisciplinary. We're going to pull concepts, coming back to that term, from a variety of different disciplines. Culture, in the syllabus is listed. Cultural anthropology. We're going to pull some concepts from there to understand macroeconomics. We're going to pull some concepts from history, from science, from physics. Those of you who started reading through here will notice that one of the areas that he was pulling concepts from had to do with philosophy. We're going to pull concepts from African philosophy to understand in totality the problem that we are dealing with in macroeconomics within Tanzania. The way of the system of analysis or the manner of analysis that we're going to use is called general systems theory. Make a note of that. It's general systems theory. That means we're going to look at things as a part of a total system. So you're going to see the macroeconomy of Tanzania as it relates to other systems within which it's part of. Systems thinking is different. So in systems thinking, you don't try to solve the economic problem without considering environmental issues, sociological issues, psychological issues. They're all related. And it all comes back to culture, because you can't separate an economy from the culture that created it. The culture is going to give that particular economic system certain value systems. Certain values are going to be a part of it. People are going to view things a certain way. You're going to think about things a certain way. For example, I learned from a land court judge here in Tanzania that if a person is living within, you're renting a residence and this is where you stay, the owner can't just come and kick you out because they want to do something else or they want to bring someone else in. They come and just throw you out. They have to go and find a place comparable to the place that you're in. The law has all of these stipulations in it. That's a part of the value system of the culture in Tanzania. Actually, of the culture within most of Africa. However, if you're in Western countries, that is not the case. Because the culture is different. So different cultures are going to go at things totally different. So you have to, with the system's way of looking at things, you not only are merely looking at it from the lens of a particular subject, but you're also approaching it from a total systems view. And that is what Capra does in this piece. The opening chapter talks about crisis. Crisis. If you look at all of those newspapers over there, and you look through them daily, as you will start doing on Monday, you will see that you've got a lot of different crises within Tanzania, within East Africa, within the global African community. A lot of crises. What do we mean by crisis? Crisis is not just things are upset or things are chaotic. The crisis is also a point of not just danger when we look at it, that crisis was a dangerous situation. But crisis also provides opportunity. Because if you have a dangerous situation, if you have a problem, if you have a crisis, then you have an opportunity to show your brilliance in solving that problem, in bringing that crisis to a harmonious conclusion. So, in the first chapter, he says the turning of the tide. He says that you've got particularly he's talking about Western culture. Why is that relevant for this class? Because the macroeconomy of Tanzania for the past 20 years, has been in a transition from being a socialist-oriented economy to a market capitalist-oriented economy. So you're going from a socialist system based on Ujamaa, based on African socialism, with African value systems, and you're going to transform yourself. That's the idea, is to transform from that, which began in 1985, into a Western-oriented market economy. It's a whole different set, because the Western economy is based on competition. It's based on conflict. You agree to certain rules of being in conflict. But there's a whole different value system. And so, this particular piece, and what he's talking about, he's analyzing the very system that the United States, the UK, that France, that Germany are trying to sell to countries in Africa, countries in Asia, countries in South America, or all of Latin America. Yes?
You say the Western economy is based on conflict. What do you mean by that?
When I say it's based on conflict, the key word in a market economy as practiced in the United Kingdom in the West is competition. Competition, you're competing. Competition is a form of conflict. When we get out on the soccer field, or the football field as you call it, you're in competition. It's a conflict. It's a type of conflict. It's considered a friendly game. It's a friendly conflict. You know, you understand that it's a game. That it's not a life or death situation. Although we see tempers flare in that type of competitive atmosphere. The market economy is based on competition. In a market economy, such as in the United States, you seldom find what I've experienced since I've been here. If I go to one shop and I'm asking for something, and that shop sells it but doesn't have it in it, what they will do is the person who owns the shop will take me to a shop somewhere else that has it. So, you know, that's a form of cooperation. That's something that grows out of a different cultural experience. In a highly competitive society, people are so concerned about their own pocketbook that what they end up doing is, you know, if they don't have it, they tell you they'll order it for you, you can come back on such and such a day. So you've got African culture which is impacting on how people businesses. But when I say in the West, when I'm talking about conflict, it's based on competition. That's you're in conflict. You're competing with someone else. There's one prize, you're both trying to get that prize. The prize is you're trying to get customers. If you and I are owning a store, we're selling similar products, we're both competing with one another to get everybody else to shop with us, or one of us. So that's what I mean by it's based on conflict. Now the systems view takes us not only, they're not just analyzing the way Western cultures are. And those of you who read the first chapter can clearly see. Look at some of the problems he mentioned. And he mentioned these problems 30 years ago. Actually, it's 40 years ago. But when if you read the opening piece, you can just change the dates. He tells you that majority of the economies of the world spend something like over a third of their budget on military equipment. Now, in 1978, he was telling you that it was like $425 billion. It's like over $425 trillion now. The countries are spending on their military. So you can just update the numbers. The problem that he was addressing in 1981 when the book was published, still hasn't been solved. Because it's still using a mode of problem solving which can't solve that problem. Something else he tells you. He says that here the number has only gone up. How many children die of starvation? At the time it was 15 million. That number is even higher today. Children in the world who die from starvation, 15 million. Children in the world who are seriously under-malnourished. Those numbers have increased in the past 40 years. They haven't gone down. The number, you can look right here within Tanzania and look at the number of people who are drinking unsafe water or unsanitary water. That's the only water they have available. Problems that he's talking about that were global in 1981 are still here today, haven't been solved. Question is, why? He tells you that in the United States, it's basically an economy that has a military-industrial complex. The United States is a country that has participated in something like 183 wars. And the country is only 220 some odd years old. 1776 to the present. It's barely over 200 years old, but it's participated in 183 wars. That's something like a war, almost a war every 18 months or something. Because you have an economy that's based on war production since World War II. And selling that material to developing countries. You're not making weapons, but you're buying them. Now, how can countries all countries of the world have people who are starving, people who are homeless, people who don't have the so-called basic amenities of life? And yet he's telling you here that here's the problem. That the majority of the world's scientists are employed not for solving those problems, but instead they're engaged in the making of weapons. Watching the news this morning, news coming out of Russia, RT.com. What were they talking about? reduction of nuclear weapons between the United States and Russia, and the prevention of allowing nuclear proliferation. They don't want North Korea to have the weapons. They don't want Iran to have the weapons. Same issues that he was talking about here still exist. So, and this is why he's saying that it's a crisis. Then he talks about industrial society. If you're once again paying attention, you're reading the newspapers all through there. You just had a conference in Dar es Salaam, and this is from the edition of the Citizen. The conference in Dar es Salaam that had to do with the poverty. It was the research on poverty alleviation. They want to reduce poverty in all developing countries. But this here was specifically talking about Tanzania. And one of the ways, obviously, that you've seen them doing since the 80s, and it's like 20 some odd, almost 30 years into trying to do this now, is to convert to industrialized economy, become an industrially based economy. What he's telling you in the crisis is that industrial economies have serious issues. Pollution issues, environmental issues. And you will notice in the first chapter, he uses the term ecology. Because this is the type of thinking that we need to be doing. An ecology is a living system. We're a part of a living system. We need all of these trees out here. We need all of these various insects that we have, all of these different animals. We're all a part of a symbiotic system, an ecology. When you start removing certain things out of that system, you upset the balance of the system, you cause problems. So he also tells you in that piece that Western society, industrial society, has a lot of psychological issues. High levels of schizophrenia. People going crazy in the West. What's causing this? They have issues that you're not. Suicide. High numbers of suicide. High numbers of suicide amongst children, amongst adults your age. When people are at the beginning of life, they're thinking about ending life. Why? The problem was not solved. It has just gotten progressively worse over time. One of the things that occurs in the media in the West is that problems, it's not when, at first the problem will be big news, it'll be on the agenda. And then suddenly it's not on the agenda. Not because the problem was solved, it's just no longer talked about. And so since it's no longer talked about, people say, oh, it's not an issue anymore. So you watch American news, you don't see anything on the news for a number of days that have to do with any conflict between ethnic groups in America. Between black and white, between black and Mexican, between Asian and black, between Asian and white. You don't see it. And then suddenly you have an issue like the case now occurring in America where the Mexican shot the African youth, chased him, shot and killed him, and then the guy is still walking around. He wasn't arrested, wasn't placed in trial, nothing was done to him. That's an issue that brings up that whole issue of racism or white supremacy in the United States. It's an issue that you really didn't see a lot of because since the election of Obama, so many people wanted to go into the fairy tale world of saying, we no longer have these problems, it's a whole new world. So in the West, just because they're not talking about stuff on the news, and you see the news every day, doesn't mean the problem was solved. They just cease to talk about it. It becomes a lie by omission. I'm lying to you by not telling you about it. It's a lie of omission. But we just don't talk about it. So people think, oh, it's solved. You actually had some people in the West who thought, there is a cure for HIV. There's a cure for AIDS. Because it was at first from 1984, 85 into the 90s, that was constantly being placed in front of everyone's eyes in the US and UK and whatnot. But now they don't talk talk about it, it's not all over the place so much. There are no huge slogans. So people, in some cases, because they don't see it on news, they must have been solved now. That's what happens when one is a passive viewer of information. But when you're a critical viewer, an active viewer, that doesn't occur. So now, in that first chapter, what he's bringing out is that Western culture is in crisis. It's destroying its environment. It's upsetting the natural order of things. It's heavily focused in on the production of military weapons, engaged in war making. And you can see that clearly right now. The U.S. and NATO just finished their military intervention on behalf of the Libyan Transitional Authority. The United States is also in Iraq, in Afghanistan, incursions, carrying a bombing campaign in Pakistan. The United States now has troops next door in the Congo and in Uganda. Under the supposedly chasing after Coney, and you saw the video, the whole viral video, trying to create the mindset in the West that here's why we need to be here. In reality, it's a power struggle between Asian and Western interests over resources that you have in the Great Lakes region in Central Africa, that you have in Eastern Africa. It's actually a resource struggle. But the exact same issues he's talking about there still occur, or are still here with us. No one solved the problems in the past 40 years, so you got to be born, the problem's still there. You're now in college, the problem's still there. And you can read through the newspapers, as you're going to be doing, and you will be seeing that people are not coming up with any real solutions to what the problems are. As a matter of fact, in this article that I just mentioned to you, that was one of the complaints that one of the Vietnamese scientists mentioned. He says, well, the Tanzanian government has what it does is they come up with all these wonderful, beautiful sounding programs or studies. Specifically, what he said was, he was criticizing Tanzania's economic policies. Now, he said it would take many years for Tanzania's economy to make tangible advances if the leadership continues on the path of talks, dialogue, and paperwork. So basically, that's what he said goes on, has been going on since 1985 in Tanzania. We have a lot of talks. They sit around and they talk. A lot of conferences. A lot of scholars show up to do presentations. The government does these huge policy documents, and nothing happens. And that was his complaint. That's the complaint that he laid out. He said the national leadership spent too much time talking, and it was time they translated strategies into concrete actions to reduce poverty. But that was the whole thing he's saying. So anyway, same problems that Capra is writing about here exist now. Now, why does Capra tell us in that first chapter? What's the reason? What's the rationale? He says the reason is because people are using the utilization of the wrong paradigm. He introduces you to that concept of paradigm. And all a paradigm is a particular way of looking at things. When I said that the educational system here was very good at memorization, basically, it was teaching you to view things in a certain way. If you are sick, you go to a doctor. You seek out a profession. If you want to learn something, then you go seek out a professional, an expert to teach you. The entire system, the paradigm, the way things are viewed, says if you need something, you don't look within yourself to find the answer. You go outside of yourself. So you don't even rely on you. For example, I told you there's no right answer. There's no such thing as a right answer. And everything depends on your point of view. So it forces you to rely on your thinking. I told you that we'll be dealing with problem solving, and I mentioned innovative, new solutions. That means that, and I told you that education means to draw out, not to put in. It's to educe, it's to pull out. We all start as something smaller than this. And this is the way the ancient people of the Nile Valley listened. They said when we began, we were something smaller than that dot. And then over a process of time, you unfolded out of that microscopic little image to what you are now. So you're in a constant process of unfolding, like a lotus flower. You know, have you ever watched the lotus flower on some of the science programs as it unfolds? Many layers. When you started off, we all started off as the same dot, and then we've grown and then began to expand out of that dot into the individual supporting. So, a concept of education based on this philosophy says that what you need, or what it is that you want to know, exists within you, and it has to be pulled out of you, or allowed to grow out of you. The example I gave before was with little children. When you have a child, you're naturally born inquisitive. You're naturally born to ask questions. The moment you stop the child from asking questions, you begin to stunt their intellectual growth. You learn through questioning. So then you get stunted in intellectual growth, and then you think you grow intellectually now when you memorize. So you've been given a lot of information, you memorize it, you think you've now grown. See, that's a different paradigm. That's that Western paradigm. That's how you make a good slave. All across Africa, we have a long history of having been turned into slaves. Eastern Africa, being sold from here off into Zanzibar, and then from Zanzibar into India, into Iraq, all of these areas in South Asia. On the western part of the continent, we have a long history of having been sold into slavery into the Americas. The process of taking a natural freeborn person and turning them into a slave, one of the first things you have to prevent is the ability to think. And there's a whole process of how you go about doing that to a person. So when you've got a system of education that is merely memorizing, you're not educated. You've been trained. We all have trained dogs. We've trained animals to do what we want to do. But what has passed for education is nothing but training. But when your education is based on this philosophical point of view, that everything you need is placed within you by the Creator and has to come out of it, allow it to come out of you in a natural process, that's totally different because now you're being self-reliant. You're relying on yourself. You understand that the answer that you seek is within you. That's a different system of education. And to go from a process where everything has been given to you and you have to memorize it, into a process where now you have to take control because the tools you need are within you, yeah, that's a difficult process at first. You're like, where's this weird dude coming from and all this stuff? You don't understand how we do things here. He's supposed to come to class, he's supposed to give us a lecture, he's supposed to hand out someone in the class with a copy of his PowerPoint presentation notes. We make copies, we study, we give us a test, we give it back to him. Ta-da! He out there talking about reading stuff, and he got 18 books listed down here, and he talking about going to the internet and go to a website. It's supposed to be something shocking. That's why I've been going slow. I've been taking it step by step. Because it's something new. I already knew that. I've already traveled here, Egypt. I visited educational school systems here, in Egypt, in the United States, in Mexico, to go see what's the system all about. I know what the system is like in the UK. So I knew when I came here what to expect. I also knew what the goal was. The best way to teach a person is to teach the person to teach themselves. That's why I say questions. You have to deal with the question first. Learn how to ask the question. You can easily get the answer. If you think the problem of why Tanzania is not developed has to do with poverty, then all you have to do is solve the problem of poverty. Well, a simple definition of poverty is people don't have enough money to buy what they want. So if we want to solve the problem, let's give everybody enough money. You can just take the richest person in the world with their trillions of dollars. They got enough money to give everybody in Tanzania $1 billion. Would that solve the problem? If I right now gave everybody in Tanzania $1 billion, would that solve the problem of the development of the Tanzanian economy? Why not?
The problem is not about money. The problem is about the integration of resources.
That means it's about the who? The use of resources. If I gave you all $1 million, what would you do with it? Yeah, go ahead on. You buy into what? Yes. Now, who owns all the cars and the houses and Tanzania? Do Tanzanians own them or other people? Other people. When it comes to cars, you're not buying them from Tanzania because you're not making cars. Coming back to what she just said. The problem is not that you ain't got enough money, it's how are you using your resources. You ain't using your resources. Somebody else is. And that's what another article, and I think that was the article that you posted. I think you posted an article. And the article was saying that in Tanzania, one of the, I'm slipping my mind just that fast. But he was making a point along those lines that the issue that what was going on in the country, I forgot now, I gotta come back to it. I forgot. But if I gave you all $1 million, you'd be giving it. If I gave you $1 million, you'd be going and giving it to all the people who own stuff. You're buying cars, you're buying houses, you're buying clothes. I look like I'm the only one in here wearing African clothes, so I don't think too many African clothing makers are going to be making no money. But all them Western clothing makers, they'll be happy. They say, look at these clothes. Give $1 million, they handed it back. Why? Because, and I told you, everything is related. If your mindset is buy, that means your mindset is a mindset of going outside of yourself to get the things you want and need. That old proverb I gave you, I don't know if it was this class, but one of my classes I gave this proverb. I said, my grandfather, I was told that my grandfather used to always say, you go to the market with your wagon full and your pockets empty. And you leave the market with your wagon empty and your pockets full. Now that is when you are a producer. You have produced a lot of goods, a lot of commodities. And you took those commodities to the market. You had no money in your pocket. Whatever money or whatever you were using for financial transactions that you had, you used them in producing your product. You went to the market, you had a lot of product. But when you left the market, your product was sold, you went home with a lot of money or whatever your finance that you were using for financial transactions in your pocket. Now, here is the buyer or consumer. How many of you are taking consumer behavior? The consumer economic behavior. They got a class of consumer economic behavior. Because the producer wants to know what he needs to do to sell to the buyer, the consumer. Now, if you're a buyer, when you go to market, your pocket's full. Your wagon empty, or your car empty. But when you leave the market, you got a lot of stuff in empty pockets. So if you got a buyer mindset, a buyer mentality, and I gave you $1 million, you'll give it right back to me if I own all the stores. And so the fact that there isn't any money, the fact that everybody doesn't have money, they solve problems. Which now brings me to the next thing I have for you. Because here's where the problem begins. Why are you not utilizing resources? Listen to this particular quote. He says, now consciousness, what is consciousness? Consciousness is being aware of one's surroundings, recognizing the existence, truth, or fact of something, being aware of the very moment, the very instant that you are in, being aware of how you affect the human, social, political, and natural ecology you are a part of, and how it affects you. Consciousness is being informed and instructed through your group's peculiar culture on the effects of the varied ecologies on your immediate and distant ancestors, and to be aware of their interpretation of that experience. This comes from Professor James Small, African scholar in the United States. Now, what is he talking about here? Let's use that critical analysis process. Let's turn things into a question. He says consciousness is being aware of one's surroundings. Are you conscious, aware of your surroundings? What are your surroundings? Consciousness is recognizing the existence or truth or fact of something. When you are told something, when you read something, do you recognize whether it is truthful or factual? Consciousness is being aware of how you affect the social environment, the political environment, and the natural environment. Are you aware of how you affect the political environment? Notice I didn't say, or he didn't say, how the political environment affects you. You have an effect on the political environment. If you decide you are not going to participate in the political system, you are having an effect on the political system. Because you're allowing people who are a part of that system to do whatever they want to do. You're saying, I don't have time for politics, I ain't got time to deal with all of that. So you're still having an effect on it. Are you informed and instructed through your own culture? The culture peculiar to Tanzania. When you take an economy from another people, you also take their culture. One of the things that Capra talks about in that piece, he says, he gives three problems that are what's wrong with Western culture. He says one of them is treatment of women. Western culture is unbalanced. Dr. Marimba Ali from the United States, you wrote a book that's called Yorubu, an African-centered critique of European cultural thought and behavior. And one of the conclusions she draws is that European culture is out of balance. It's a male-dominated culture. It's based on female subordination. Woman, shut up, get in the kitchen. You've had movements in the U.S., feminism and whatnot, that have attempted to address that imbalance. When you take that culture, you get a culture that's a male-dominated culture. However, the solution that Capra talks about, the solution that Annie talks about in her book, is a balanced culture. So you're actually, like Professor James Small is saying there, you need to know the impact of what you're doing now on your ancestors. Does that make any sense in a Western frame of mind? In the West, we don't do things based on, now how is this going to affect my ancestors? Your ancestors are ancestors. They passed. So exactly how can what you do affect them? Now what Capra does is he says you have to, in order to solve the problems that we're dealing with, you have to go back, and that's what he does. He uses Chinese culture. And he's showing that ancient Chinese, not modern Chinese culture, but modern Chinese culture is just like Western culture. He said, so when you look at ancient Chinese culture, we don't even have to go to China, we just look at African culture, the traditions that were here. Because what I just gave you, when I talked about beginning as something smaller than a microscopic dot and expanding into you, this is traditional African philosophy. This is prior to Arab invasion, this is prior to European invasion. This is how they explained everything. In the Nile Valley. You see the symbol that I wear around my neck. I wear it for a reason. Or on the rings on my finger. Sometimes I have a small or large one. It's called an aunt. It represents life. But it doesn't it's similar to a cross, but there's a difference. There's a circle on the top. The cross is a male-oriented symbol. But the aunt is a symbol that's based on complementarity. The bottom half represents man, the top half, the circle, the egg, the womb, represents the female. You put the two together and you have what? Life. This is all ancient African philosophy. Because your economy must be based on a culture. And it's going to have certain values within it. Western culture, oh no, they don't consider the ancestors. But you got to understand, everything that you're doing right now is based on the experiences of the past. Where you are right now is the result of somebody's sacrifices. I'm able to stand right here in the Ringa, in East Africa, in Tanzania, on the African continent, because of my mother and the sacrifices she made so that I could go through and get all these different educational degrees. My father, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents who were enslaved in America, I'm standing on their shoulders. So everything I do, I have to remember the sacrifices that these people made to put me where I am, and also take into account that I'm setting an example for those who are not yet born. That's a different cultural mindset. That's what that first chapter is. That's where he's taking me. That's where it's taking me. Why does that matter for economics? Because when you look at economics as a part of a culture, as a part of a value system, coming back to our big overall question, why is the economy undeveloped? You get a whole different answer. But if you look at it from the Western view, which is compartmentalized, which is male-dominated, which is unbalanced, you get a weird answer. You get the situation you have today in the world. America, richest country in the world, that throws away more food per day than some countries see in a year. Yes, in America, fast food restaurants, when they finish cooking, at the end of the day when they're going to close, whatever food that's left over, they don't take it and give it away. They trash it. Western society is a very wasteful society. You've got places in the world where children are dying of starvation, but in the U.S. we toss out billions of tons of food a day. Oh yes. It's a wasteful society. We wake up and we're going to cook something for the day and we say, and you got something left tomorrow. Some families say, well, we don't eat leftovers. They throw it away. Feed it to a dog. That's a wasteful society. So when you look at another society and you're looking at that, what you're taking from that society, you got to analyze. And how do we analyze what Capra is telling us? So we begin. What is his purpose? His purpose in the opening chapter. That's the first question. What is his purpose? His purpose is to let us know that Western society has a crisis. It has problems. Yes, lots of them. They are there. They are not hidden. That's the first purpose he has there. But he also wants us to understand that if you're going to solve those problems, you can't use the mindset that created the problem. Now let's operationalize that in the Tanzanian setting. What caused the problem that the Tanzanian economy is an example of? What is the cause of that problem? Has this area of Africa always been the way it is now? Was there ever a time when it was not like this? Was there ever a time when no one went to bed hungry? When no one died of disease? When no one died of starvation? The only way you can answer that question is if you have an understanding of your own history written by your own historians. Yes. That's what he's getting at. And just the first step. So you got to flip back and go backward. The Western paradigm doesn't work. Western society is in a crisis. It's been in a crisis. It's been in a 500-year crisis. Europeans did not, Westerners, they didn't leave Europe to go see the rest of the world because they were curious. They left Europe because Western society was in crisis. It was facing disease. It was facing poor food. As they left, they came into Africa and they were like, oh, that's how you preserve food. Oh, this is how you reduce disease. You take a bath every night. You improve your hygiene. They didn't know that at first. They came here and learned that. They went to Asia and they learned those things. The society has been in a crisis. Capitalism is based on crisis. Surprise them. Think about it. Can you think of any traditional African economic system that does its best work after it blows something up? The American economy centers around the military-industrial complex. So, if you go to a country and you have a military operation, you send a bunch of people, you blow up a lot of stuff, and then you come back in with some more companies to rebuild it. That's a lot of money. You're spending money on your military, you got to replace all the bombs and drop all those bullets you use. And then you make sure that some of these places, they stay in turmoil. So the UK, France, the US, they bring all of these soldiers from here, train them in the US, and then send them back. They know what's eventually going to happen. What just happened in Mali? The leader of the military coup in Mali was trained in the United States. Hadn't been too long, come back. Went over to the US, got some training, got some ideas, came back. Next thing you know, what is he doing? Leading the military coup. So now what does that do? Throws the country into some turmoil. You know, got some fighting going on. You already had, because of the U.S. intervention in Libya, the U.S., the UK, and France, all of this Western interest. It's not just America. It's all of these countries that work together. Now, the fighting in Libya spills over into Mali. Then the Mali troops say they upset with the way the government was dealing with the Tuareg rebels in the north of the country, so they overthrow the government. It's all related. There's a relationship here. And Western countries know that. This is what capital is getting at. You've got to cipher these problems. And if you're going to solve the problems that you're dealing with here, first you got to figure out what caused them. Then you're going to need a new paradigm. Or you got to have a shift, paradigm shift. Are there any questions so far?
Production in the United States of America. But all I know is that the United States of America and Mexico plus Russia and other countries, they are producing nuclear weapons at a large quantity. While United States of America is opposing other countries to produce a special socialistic countries like North Korea, Iran, and other countries. So it is quite explainable a little more about what's really happening, why United States of America is opposing other countries.
For those who didn't hear, she wants to know, reading the text, you can see that the Western countries, Russia, the US, the UK, they have nuclear weapons, they're constantly developing new nuclear weapon systems and all of that. They're still doing it. And yet, they're opposing other countries from developing those weapons. And it's North Korea, Iran. Why are they doing that? Let's see. What's your name again? Noah. Let's say that Noah has all of the guns in here and all of the bullets. So if he's got all the guns and all of the bullets, nobody else has any guns and any bullets, what is Noah capable or able to do? What can he do? He got all the guns, and he decides that he wants to talk to you, and he's like, I'm not talking to you. Wait a minute. Well, because he has the coercive power, he can force you to go along with what he says. Unless say somebody else says, no, that's wrong. It's an issue of power. That's the whole point. Western countries right now wanted to maintain a monopoly on nuclear weapons, nuclear power, things of that nature. If they couldn't maintain a monopoly, they at least wanted to have control of the governments that had that power. For example, Iran. Right now in the news, as you just told you, the US, UK, France are opposing Iran's peaceful development of nuclear energy. But what the United States and the rest of them didn't tell you, and only someone who's read past 30 or 40 years of history knows, is the United States is the reason that Iran has all those nuclear plans. Before the Iranian Revolution in 1979, something like 80% of all scientists in the U.S. Who were studying nuclear energy and all of that were from Iran, because at the time the Shah of Iran was in control. He was a friend of the U.S. The U.S. oil companies were in there exploiting Iranian oil, doing whatever they wanted to, and that was the situation. The student revolution in Iran overthrew the Shah of Iran, and then when the Ayatollah Khomeini came to power, they nationalized the Iranian oil industry. They said, we're going to use this oil to benefit as many people as possible. It's an issue. That's one aspect of the situation that most folks aren't familiar with without a thorough reading of history. Why did the United States not want those two governments to have it? Because they don't have control of the U.S. or Western interests. They don't control those governments. They're concerned with Pakistan because they don't really have control of Pakistan. It's a monopoly. What do you think all those nuclear weapons are pointed at? The United States and Russia just told each other in a recent meeting that they weren't pointing weapons at each other. They're pointing them at somebody. I mean, you have nuclear weapons that trained at somebody for some purpose. There was a news article in the USA Today back in 1996, and it stated that the American nuclear arsenal was no longer trained on Russia. It stated that there were like 5 or 6 countries. One of them was Ethiopia, and a few other countries. Those countries were African countries and Asian countries that those weapons were aimed at. They're no longer aimed at those two European nations aren't aiming weapons at each other anymore. It's an issue of power, especially with nuclear weapons. If you balance the military playing field, right now we've got an imbalance. All the military technology is in the West, and they are not selling the top military technology to countries like Tanzania. You leftover, the old technology, and you get just enough of that technology so that one African country can kill another African country. That's it. You don't get enough of that technology to challenge the West to power. No. That's not how international political economy works. That's not how economics works on the international sphere. No. It's an issue of power. That's why they don't want those particular countries with it. Those countries can't control it. But they don't have control of those countries. It's an issue of power when you're dealing with this. And Capitalist telling you in his piece, all of this crisis can be resolved with a systems view of looking at things and a new paradigm that's based on balance. So that means one of the first things you have to do within a society is you have to restore the African woman to the place that she held at one point in African society. Western religions are all male-dominated religions. They are. God is He. Traditional African religions are balanced religions. Think about the language of Swahili. You don't have specific gender in the language. Anafundisha is either he teaches or she teaches. It's not gender specific. That takes you back to, see, the culture is carried in the language. In a balanced culture, the language is going to be balanced, society is balanced. There was never a women's movement in traditional African culture because women had a role within the society. And it wasn't a role that was based on being told what to do. It was a role which was a natural outgrowth of the purpose of female. Capra is taking you back to it. That's why he says in the chapter, one of the problems in the West is female subordination, and you got to rectify that. Majority of the world's poor are women and children. You are not going to solve the problem of poverty in Tanzania if you ignore the position of women in society. And by ignoring the position of women, you ignore the position of children or the future. There's a proverb say, you educate a woman, you educate a nation. There's another proverb. These are all African proverbs that are several thousand years old. There's another one that says that so the woman goes, so the nation goes. And then when you look at biological science, there's what's called the inductive theory of development, which says that everybody begins as a female. When you look at the biological sciences and you look at the human, the fetus when it develops, initially it is at a state of balance. It is feminine. To become male, you have to add something. In the natural state, everyone begins as female. Now, in Western science, they tell you, well, you know, we don't really know what the gender, as they put it, of the fetus is. This is holistic thinking. This is systems thinking. This is when your knowledge grows out of that basis, which is what Capra is telling you out of the systems point of view. It's a balanced point of view. It's balance. That's what you have to do as far as thinking is concerned. You have to go all the way back to the root in order to come up with a solution that will rectify the situation. You have to properly define what the problem is. So, with that first chapter, what you're doing is you start down, you get an idea of what his ideas are. Now you go back to your own particular critical analysis piece and you start asking questions. What was his purpose? What is he trying to do? He's trying to solve the problem. In order to solve the problem, he's trying to get you to figure out some things on your own. He makes assumptions, but what's good is that he tells you what the assumptions are because he's using a critical perspective to write. So he doesn't leave anything up in the air for you. The whole point of the book is to get you to think critically. That's why it's the first reading you have listed. One of the chapters is specifically dealing with economics, because he's now providing you with a holistic view of economics, a multidisciplinary view of economics. What information and data does he use? Most of the information that he uses is information that you can get your hands on at the local newspaper. Every day, some story in there is telling you about military and poverty and the position of women in society. All of these things. It's right in newspapers. Then he says, oh, and he also uses other studies, and he uses ancient culture. He goes back to the ancestors. They had to face the same problem. Think about it. How is it that African people can produce the world's first civilization in the Nile Valley that existed for 10 to 15,000 years, but yet now we're struggling to solve simple problems? Now think about it. We've got 10 to 15,000 years of history where we can not just any old societies, but stable societies, balanced societies. We have to go back and look at our own history, because our solutions to the problems we face are coming from us, not outside of us. You can't go to the UK and get the solution to the problem in Tanzania, especially considering that's where the problem began. It doesn't work that way. Your solution to your problem begins in your own history. And you can't start your history in 1800. What was East Africa like in 1800? I read several of the different formed history books, and they always start in 1800. You have to go before that to fully grasp it. So that's the evidence he's using in that text. He's using historical evidence, he's using economic evidence, he's using political evidence, he's using cultural, anthropological evidence. He introduces you to what concepts and ideas does he use? Value system. That's a key one that he uses. Value system. Do you understand the value system of the culture that you're taking these institutions from? He does that. That's his evidence. What inference does he make? His first inference is that if there is no change in the way they think in the West, the societies will destroy themselves. A society that's based on nothing but economic growth, the production of more and more things cannot be sustained. Another point he makes is that you can't build your economy based on fossil fuels. Right now, companies are getting excited because right off the coast of Tanzania, we got massive deposits of natural gas. People by the year 2300, all of these so-called fossil fuels will be gone. But one of the things he mentions in the chapter is that you have to find alternative sources of fuel. And after you got one of the greatest alternative sources available, this country should be based on solar energy. You never have a longer day than night. You've got an abundance of solar energy. Right now, people who use solar energy in Tanzania are importing the technology from China. You should be producing it here. Abundance of solar energy. All the sunlight you can use. And it can be a source of electrical energy. That's one of the things he mentions in the book. You can't depend on fossil fuels. And our societies have never depended on those fuels. And then what are the consequences of what he says? He says the consequence is you get an orderly social transformation, a cultural transformation. That's one consequence. Another consequence is you avoid disaster. Crisis, unchecked crisis leads to disaster. You got a lot of dead people. One of the things that Kikwete said in one of the articles I was reading, he was talking about the whole health issue in the country. He said what needs to be emphasized is not just we need more doctors, because That's really not the problem. The problem is how you get sick. So what you want to do is you want to go back to how you get sick and engage in preventative medicine. Preventative solutions. And someone, or just have a conversation with them yesterday, we were talking about the first preventative solution is diet. What are you putting in here? If you're putting a great deal of sugar, and that's back to holistic situation, back to economics, macroeconomics, health is a big part of the economy. Very big part. How do you prevent yourself from getting sick? Your diet is real simple. You know, if you eat a lot of sugar, and we take a lot of sugar around here. We got sugar in tea, you got sugar in all the sweets in the store. You're weakening your immune system. So the more sugar you take into your system, and sugar acts on your system like a drug, you weaken your immune system and open yourself up for greater types of sickness. You ride out your teeth, you get a whole bunch of different, all kinds of sicknesses. Your immune system is weak. But there are certain things that you can eat based upon your blood type, based upon your ancestral history. For example, medical evidence has been shown, and Captain talks about it in the book. Cancer is considered a disease of civilization, Western civilization. Early Western missionaries and doctors, when they came into East Africa, two things they did not find: people who were overweight or any amount of cancer. Nobody had cancer. It was unknown. Then one missionary came back 30 years later, and he was in Kenya, and he said, before when he was there in the early 1900s, he saw no fat Kenyans or overweight Kenyans. When he came back, because now you had 30 years of Western culture, you had people that were overweight, they had all kinds of health issues, and now they had cancer. Western society, Western culture is toxic. It kills. It kills people in the West. Heart attack, hypertension, people dying from worry, all kinds of stuff. So that's a major component to the whole health issue. And Catherine touches on that. You got health economists to sit down and look and calculate what's going on. That's a very big part of the situation. And that's some of the information that he uses. And then the other question, is he clear on his information? That requires you to go and do some additional work. Is he accurate? Go check the numbers that he gives you. Are they accurate? Is he precise? Is the information that he utilizes relevant to solving the problem? He's trying to solve the same problem that exists right now. Anyway, when you now go and you read chapter 2, you read chapter 3, you read chapter, I think it's 6 and 7 and chapter 9, each of those, you're going to do a written critical analysis. You are not just to read. You're going to read them and then come back and analyze them utilizing these questions. Are there any questions about what I'm requiring you to do? Does everybody understand? If you need help, office, sit there. I be in there. You come. I help. Any other questions? Any thoughts? Any criticisms? Any concerns?
Yes. I think next strategies which can help for applications around. The countries next strategies which causes problems or crises in the country.
You're saying, is it true that developed countries make policies or strategies that cause problems in poor countries? Well, let's just look at Tanzania. You have a Chinese development agency, you've got a Japanese development agency, you have the U.S. Agency for International Development, you've got the German Development Agency, the Swiss, the Finnish, the French, the Italian, all of these different development agencies from these other countries, and they're creating solutions. They're coming up with programs supposedly to solve some problem in Tanzania. One of them is doing something to improve water. These agencies have been here since the 60s. Does the problem still exist? Are they doing it on purpose? Are they purposefully creating problems, just doing things to cause problems? Many of the people who work at those agencies really think they're doing a good thing. You know, it's like a missionary comes, and they really think they're doing a good thing by bringing the gospel and teaching people about Jesus. And they feel that this is a good thing. From what? Their point of view. From the German point of view, it's a good thing what they're doing in the development of Tanzania by creating this development project and bringing in German technicians to run the project and paying those technicians for the project. You know, so this is a good thing from their point of view, but is it a good thing from the Tanzanian point of view? What was supposed to be the goal of whatever the project is? I'm not going to say it's a conspiracy, like there's a group of folks sitting around with a conspiracy, because it's not. They write this stuff. You've got lots of books published in the West that tell you that all of these development agencies and all of this aid is not developing anything. You got Lords of Poverty. You got written by, I think his name is Graham Hancock. Shows you that there's a problem with it. You have this sister, she's from, I forgot the country she's from, and I can't remember her name now, but she's real big. African woman, and she's talking about problems with the aid. You've got George Ayete out of Ghana. He's written 3 books. Well, actually, he has 4. His first one is African Indigenous Institutions, and he covers the whole continent, showing that development has to be based on African Indigenous institutions. Then he has a second book. He's got another book, which is Africa Unchained. Then he's got 2 others. The other 3 that I mentioned are a series. And in all of his books, he's showing problems. The things that they're doing aren't solving the problems that you see in Tanzania, and they can't solve the problem. And the policymakers have read this stuff, they know this, but the aid industry, it's an industry. There's a lot of people in the West who have jobs tied up in this. Now, you get individuals who come in and they're idealistic, and they think they're coming to help. And then when things don't turn out right, they think that it's the African mindset, or there's some blame away. Because they don't even have the intellectual tools to solve the problem. That's what capitalism is bringing us to. So those things, those different programs are not going to solve it. That conference that I was just reading about poverty reduction, where the Vietnamese was talking about, further in the article, he said in this country, what they did was. And as I read what he said, I was thinking, the country still has like over 50-60% of the people are living in poverty. So they haven't even solved it in his own country. So you can look at the evidence and tell that the stuff doesn't solve the problem. I mean, Tanzania should have the best education system in the world with all these different private schools around it. You got all these different international schools funded by different churches. It should be a top-notch education system. But every time I watch the television or read the newspaper, I'm not getting that. People are like, here's what's wrong with education. When you misdefine what the problem is, you can't solve it. Any other questions? So does everyone understand that on Monday you should have a critical analysis of the remaining chapters? We understand that. I don't want any confusion, because I was concerned when I realized that there were some folks who thought you were supposed to be presenting something. That being the case, If there are no further questions, I will see you on Monday.